Hello, and a very warm welcome to this interview today with Laurelle Rond. Laurelle Rond is an author, composer, and soul archaeologist. I'm really excited to be here today to interview Laurelle and talk to Laurelle, especially about her latest book, Pearly Eye. Hello, Laurelle.
Hello.
Great to see. How is the life in Shropshire today? We've had some crazy winds here.
Well, for once, we're only being battered by rain. We've been flooded several times, so that comes as some relief. Um, and the wind is okay. So yeah,
Okay,
we're
good.
lucky.
Good, good. Wonderful. So we're here for a very special reason, and that is to talk about your recently published first novel called Pearly Eye. So congratulations. I
Thank
do
you.
personally know how long this has
Yep.
taken you, which we will come on to. But yeah, well done,
Thank you.
because it's now available on Amazon and through Laurelle's website, laurellerond.com. But I would like to start with asking you about the why, because not that I've ever done it, but writing a novel apparently is an incredible mammoth task. All the great authors share that. But to write such a historically accurate novel that delves into spirituality and really delves into spirituality and what the soul is, I mean, it must have been phenomenally challenging, way more than just writing a modern day novel. What drove you to do this, Laurelle?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. I remember that when I was 12 and there was a careers fair, I wouldn't go because I said, I'm going to be a writer. I don't need to discuss what I'm going to do. And I'd written poetry from virtually being able to write. I'd been writing music. Um, but there came a time in my life when I just had my third child. So I was just about hitting 40, a very interesting time. Um, and the first impulse was I'd moved to Oxfordshire and I loved cycling round the lanes of the different villages. And it was as though each one had a different atmosphere. And I came across one which made my skin crawl. And I couldn't understand it. I'd be there on my bicycle and I'd be heading towards this particular space. And I was in a mess. And I then later on, I went to local to there, a museum, and there was a skeleton in the museum. And I discovered this had been unearthed in this village in preparation for a landfill site. Two Anglo-Saxon skeletons were found and they were separated. So one went to this local museum and one went to one of the big museums in Oxford. And I just felt this. These people had been separated. So I wanted to write a story which would reunite them. And you can't do that in poetry, and you can't do that in music. So a novel was the obvious thing. And I've always adored reading novels. So that was the first impulse. The second one was I'd had a fairly traumatic life. And I wanted to seek deep healing, not the kind of healing that you get that's putting a plaster over a wound, but healing that wound.
Mm.
And I'd begun to discover or to research spirituality in quite a deep way and found out about reincarnation and past lives and had some experience of what mine were as well. And the two things really came together.
Mm.
Now, I didn't actually start writing the Anglo-Saxon story. I had a copy of Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And in there is a method called morning pages, where the moment you wake up, You sit in your bed with a notepad and you write for 20 minutes. Don't worry about punctuation. You just write. And within 2 days, this entire story about Native Americans just fell out onto the page.
Wow.
And that was actually the beginning place for writing what became Pearly Eye.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Goodness me. So I automatically want to jump to the eighth question I've listed. But so that is that story in Pearly Eye? Is part of that?
I over the 25 years it's taken me to to learn how to write a novel to start off with. It's a much more complex process than one might imagine. Take a piece of plasticine and you start molding it and working out what works and what doesn't. I must have over that time written 10-12 novels.
Wow.
The Native American story ended up in the second one because I always knew it was going to be a trilogy. And then probably a couple of years ago, I realized we'd all become so woke that I dare not write a story about Native Americans, because whilst I'd visited America and Canada and met some Native Americans and saw their plight and love Native American philosophy, I am not a Native American. And realized that actually I needed to do British stories. So that wonderful download doesn't appear. However, there are little aspects from it which are woven into what has become the Anglo-Saxon story, which is in the second one, Amber Heart, which I'm writing at the moment.
Wow. Yeah, can't wait for that. That's really great. So do morning pages, folks. I personally recommend it as well. I've done them and they are remarkable. So brilliantly segued into, let's talk about your key character, Selena. She has a phenomenally distinctive, what is a disability, a challenge, a very difficult part. Where did that come from? And also, I'd like to ask you, who's your favorite character in the book?
Okay, so where her Pearly Eye, so she's got one eye that looks white, but it's got a pupil and it appears to be completely blind. And of course, as a child, she's gone to hospital, she's been investigated by doctors, blah, blah, blah. By the time we meet her, she's trying to become a singer-songwriter. And she hides behind an eye patch. And so she's called the Pirate. That's just that part of the story will evolve through the trilogy. I don't know where the idea from the Pearly Eye came from, except one of the millions of ideas I had was that I would write a novel called The Girl with Three Eyes. So she was going to have an eye in the center of her forehead as well. And of course, we know this is the third eye here. And I suppose somewhere in the weird and wonderful machinations of the imagination, this translated into a pearly eye. So the whole book really is the quest for her to discover what this pearly eye is about, because it's not a disability at all. It's a very powerful skill that she has yet to develop, of seeing inside herself. So it's like you've got one eye looking out into the world and you've got one eye looking into the inner world. And I remember being told many years ago that there is as much inside us as there is outside us. And when we look at the universe, that blows your mind.
It sure does. Goodness me. Yeah, I love it. It's
My favorite character.
It's so
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
This is important. This is really important. So one of the traumas I needed to get over was a very violent marriage. And I started writing right at the beginning a story which had a violent husband in it, who was awful. That that character has morphed over the 25 years into Carl. Carl is my favorite character. He is, we've heard of automatic writing where you just write and it's like some spirit writes for you. He's an automatic painter. So he's a very good artist who has been repressed all of his life by a very domineering mother. And suddenly he sees all these images which he has to paint. And it's as though his paintbrush has a life of its own. But in himself, he is the most sensitive character in the book. He's fragile beyond belief. But through the trilogy, he also starts to develop.
Wow, that's a good teaser.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, that's really good to know. Really good. And obviously that you've just sort of hinted, I think, but what aspects of Pearly Eye relate to your kind of professional life as well, and perhaps other parts of your personal life? What references or what aspects do?
Well, first of all, I have to say my absolute adoration of my pets. So there is a dog. A dog is rescued at the beginning of Pearly Eye, and a cat is rescued at the beginning of Amber Heart. And my dog and my cat are just my dearest companions. I adore them. There's a lot of busking that goes on at the beginning of Pearly Eye, and this is something I very much have experienced, and brief homelessness, which I have also experienced. After that, well, the honest truth is, I think, that every character is an aspect of me. So you can look at these characters as archetypes. In other words, patterns of behavior. And of course, the Pearly Eye looks inward, so it makes sense that this is an inward look into a person. It doesn't have to be me. We all have aspects of these same things inside ourselves. So the whole thing is a very interesting psychological, archaeological dig.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And obviously that there's a huge historical element. And are you interested in history?
I've always loved history, always. I mean, for A level, I was so lucky. I chose music, English, and history, and they are my three loves, you know. So I love history. I do research. I did loads of research for the Native American story. The more I go on, the less research I do, because at the end of the day, it's in my imagination. And I realize now, as I read book after book after book, that it's the fantasy of the imagination which really interests me. There's enough reality around. I don't get on terribly well with reality, if I'm honest. I get on much better with the imagination. So yeah, the Bronze Age is the historical period for Pearly Eye. Yes, I have researched, but I forget everything I've researched. It goes in somewhere, possibly, probably, who knows. And then the imagination. What happens is when I sit down to write, I kind of push a button in my mind and a film starts to roll and I write what I see. There is no planning whatsoever that goes into it. Not an efficient way to write. This is why it's taken me so long. We just have to pray that the next two don't take me 25 years each. Otherwise, there we go. But it's this watching the film. And I am as surprised as the reader is about what happens. And the definition of a really good morning writing for me is going, good Lord, I didn't know that was going to happen. It's brilliant. I love it.
That's fantastic. I love it. So no planned, we were going to come on to this in a bit later on, but no planned kind of
No,
structure, no post-it notes all over the wall, this,
no.
no, none of that.
The nearest I get to structure is the runes.
Ah, yeah.
So the runes I discovered on a trip, my 60th birthday, actually, a trip to the Lofoten Islands in the north of Norway. Now, as a child, I had a recurring dream of being, I can see it now in my head, of walking along the top of a hill in 24-hour daylight. So I went to the Lofoten Islands on the 21st of June, which of course is maximum daylight.
Mm.
And I would, I don't sleep, I'll have plenty of time to sleep later, but for the moment, I don't really sleep much. So I would sit there at 3 a.m. looking at this midday sky, and nobody would be around, and the mountains would shine colors onto the fiords and the water. I mean, it was just extraordinary. I can't remember why I'm telling you this. Remind me. We run off onto one.
You were going to share about runes and why is
Runes. So I
Rune
discovered
Trilogy.
runes. Absolutely. Thank you. So runes are a Nordic, Germanic, ancient alphabet of originally 24 symbols. A 25th symbol was added later on. So I take a rune as a heading for each chapter throughout the trilogy. So there are 25 chapters in all. Actually, there are more than that, but I've obviously done something or other. We'll find out when we get there. But as far as Pearly Eye is concerned, and Amber Heart anyway, each chapter is headed by a rune. Now, a rune is a divination tool. So this rune predicts what is going to happen. The question is, on what level? Is it going to be a physical level, an emotional level, a mental level, a spiritual level? We have to read to find out.
So, like people use the tarot.
Yes.
It's a similar, but it sounds like because tarot has actually is quite new in the scheme of things, isn't
Yes.
it? But so runes have been around how long?
Do you know, it's a very good question, but thousands of years as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. And so is there a place for runes for today for people that are interested?
Well, there certainly is for me. I do a rune reading every morning.
Right.
And I have runes as in stones with the symbol carved in, and I have a set of cards. Mostly I like to use the stones, and I will just, like grains of sand, I will have a question in my head, usually something like, what or how do I need to approach today?
Yeah.
Is an example.
Yeah.
It can be something very specific. I tumble them through my hands, and I allow a certain number to fall out. It could be 1, it could be 5, not usually more than that. And then in my journal, I write them down, what they are, and it's extraordinary how they give me insight into the process of the day that's about to happen. And for example, one of my favorite ones is called ISA, ISA, which is a single vertical line. And it stands for ice. It stands for stop, pause, deep winter. And when I get this, I know that my craziness needs to just hold back a bit and just have a nap, take a breath, take a pause. Something in this imagination needs a bit more time to work, or I'm tired or whatever. And it gives me permission to do what I need to do.
And so these have been used for thousands of years. Do you know any of the history of that? I'm slightly intrigued, and I'll try not to go off.
I have got it all written down, and like most research I do, I would need to read it out to you. But basically, it derives from a farming community. So you have symbols for an ox, all natural things. The weather. I mean, the each of the books has a particular rune associated with it. The rune for Pearly Eye is a gift. It's a cross shape, and it's called Gebo, Gebo. And Selena digs up this ancient artifact, which she calls a necklace. And there are pendants that hang from this necklace. And the bottom one is a stone with this sign on it. And of course, learning how to use her Pearly Eye, as this necklace starts to enable her to do, is a gift. Finding our unique ability and contribution to the world is an absolute gift. When we find out who we really are, we are a gift to ourselves and to the world.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I think runes have been sort of hid away for a while, so perhaps it's time for runes to have a resurgence.
The rune revival.
Yes, the rune revival. There we go. We've kind of covered it a little bit, but in case there's anything else, the two topics that's come to mind from this book, and I have been blessed to read it, are reincarnation and past lives. So what are your personal beliefs on these two topics?
Well, I look back at what has been a fairly, shall we say, challenging life, and I see patterns that I cannot explain. To preface that, my belief is that between lives, we work out what we next need to learn, as though we're at a school and our soul is trying to develop into its spirit. And so why did I choose to have these experiences, which were frankly not very pleasant? When I went back into some of my past lives, I began to see patterns evolving, and I certainly realized that people I was with now, I had known before. Now, none of those stories happen in the novels, but basically, Selena experiences something traumatic and she escapes to Oxfordshire, where I was living at the time and lived for 30 years. And she goes on this, she finds herself with certain people, experiencing certain things. And this necklace that I've told you about, in combination with her Pearly Eye and the location that she ends up in, which happens to have an archaeological dig going in, digging up the history, take her back to the Bronze Age, where the patterns of what she is going to experience and the people she's going to be with originate. And then, of course, in Amber Heart, this then goes to the 6th century Anglo-Saxon, early Anglo-Saxon England. And then in Selenite Soul, the 3rd of the trilogy, that then moves even more recently into medieval England, which is about 14th century. So you see how the same people keep coming together and the patterns get more and more intense, and all the unresolved parts of those patterns she ends up with having to face in her present life.
Wow, brilliant. Yeah, so like it's a soul journey, soul
family. Yeah, it's a soul journey, absolutely.
Within a family, so there's like
yes.
a soul constellation.
A soul constellation, not in her person. She has no family left in the sense of blood family, but her soul tribe, if you like. That's probably a little bit too spiritual for the way she's not a particularly spiritual person. You know, this is not a spiritual self-help book on any level at all. This is about bringing people to understand that they are body, mind and spirit, and most people haven't got a clue about the spirit part, and until they do start to learn about it, they are very incomplete. And the other important thing to say is that I studied shamanism and in fact became a shamanic healer. What that said, and that's the oldest religion in the world, so you've got one of the oldest alphabets and one and the oldest religion, which says that when you experience a trauma, it can be loss, it can be bereavement, it can be violence, a little bit of your soul splinters off and hides somewhere. And what a shamanic healer does is they find that soul splinter, they bring it back to the person, and they don't feel so empty anymore. They are more whole and complete. And so another way of looking at Pearly Eye and the trilogy is she has 3 soul splinters which need to be brought home.
Brilliant. Wow, that's a great way to see it. Yeah, and so obviously the shamanism has a big part to play through.
And it also shows us that however horrific our experience might have been, and heaven knows there are some horrific things going on in the world at the moment, we can face the karma that's been created, and we can get the soul splinters back. We can become whole again if we're prepared to look inside ourselves. And that's the big F, because it's not an easy journey. It really isn't. But it's an amazing, wonderful journey if you've got the courage to go on it.
Wonderful. What a great note to bring the interview to an end on. Laurelle, thank you so much today. Can you just confirm how people can connect with you, and obviously where they can buy the book?
So you can go straight onto the Amazon site and put in Pearly Eye, or put in my name, Laurelle Rond, and the book is available as Kindle and paperback. It will, I hope, shortly be available in hardback as well, and Audible is down the line, but that will happen too. You can also go onto my website, which is www.laurellerond.com. Laurelle is spelled Laurelle, and there's a story behind that as well, but that's for another time. There's a story behind everything.
You can tell us about your name.
Indeed.
And when can we expect Amber Heart, the second in the trilogy?
Oh, well, isn't that a good question? I have been writing the current version, which will be the version now probably solidly for 2 years. I would love to think that I can have it published next Halloween.
Perfect.
But that is the aim. The Halloween after is probably more realistic, but we will see what happens.
I've got a feeling in my rune bones.
In your rune bones, absolutely.
It'll be next year. Finally, just as a takeaway, because there are a lot of people that would love to write a novel. I should imagine you've learned a fair few things, and like you started at the beginning of the book, your way was this way, and there are many different ways to write novels. But what would be your top tips for anyone who'd like to write a novel?
Well, the most important is the absolute need to write. If it is a choice, then I wouldn't go there. I need to get things out in language. Now, I love music. I use music as a sanctuary. I don't have the need to do music in the way that I have the need to do words.
Right.
I would say patience is vital. Perseverance is vital. But it's the loving it. I was up this morning at 1 a.m. because I am so excited going to bed at night thinking, oh, to write again in the morning. Honestly, it's like going into a world of your own creation. It's fantastic. I feel completely amazing when I am writing.
Wow.
And that's the impetus you need. And some people will find it in sport, some people will find it in art. We all have a different way. So finding the key thing in your life, and if it's writing, then go for it. Never, never, never be put off, because one day your dreams will come true and you will be published.
Wonderful, as you have proved.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Laurelle. It's been a joy and a delight to talk to you and find out more about what's behind the pages of Pearly Eye.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for interviewing me.
Take care.
Okay. Bye for now.